Mike Johnson, welcome back to T-Town, sir. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing good, man. I hope the background's not too loud right now. I'm outside of the SC Country Studios, and as you know, the MARTA's flying by me right now. But it's good to be back on with you guys, man. It's finally starting to look like a couple teams are taking the field, and boy, you know me, that gets me excited about SEC football being back.
Yeah, and certainly we want to work our way to college football. I think Auburn and Vanderbilt opened up. Vanderbilt yesterday, Auburn today. But I want to go to your host there, your co-host of SEC Country Live, Brandon Adams, big Georgia guy. Over under, how many times do you jab him a day on the victory over the Dogs?
Quite often. You know, just in a couple of times in the last week, we showed the Mike Patrick Britney Spears highlight the other day as like a send off to Mike Patrick, and I just had to mention to him that's the last time Georgia's beaten Alabama was back in 2007 for that Britney Spears clip, and then today we featured the Scott Cochran Twitter video, and boy, he wanted to take that video off the screen as soon as it came on. It's definitely nice having the upper hand. Boy, you know that Bama was an eyelash away from not having the upper hand in that situation. So it's definitely nice to be king, and obviously Alabama for a lot of the past decade has been king of college football.
I want to go to Scott Cochran. Help us understand his role within this program.
Boy, it is an absolute huge deal to see Scott Cochran. And I mentioned this today on the show. We were talking about Scott Cochran and his input at halftime and giving a halftime speech and tweeting out the video. I mean, he's come tenfold since I was part of that program. I mean, a guy like that who gets his first strength and conditioning job at Alabama back in 2007, you know, he's a liaison for Nick Saban. He's a go-between. He is a guy that you can sound off of at a time like right now. When Nick Saban's hitting the recruiting trail, when they're doing camps throughout the summer, Scott Cochran is the quote-unquote kind of summer head coach. I mean, he really is. He's the guy that can reach out to you. He's the guy whose office you sit in. He's the guy that's kind of the go-between, the sounding board. So he's a huge part of that program. I think that he has become integral to me is not even a big enough word. He's become such a big part of that program that now you see Scott Cochran becoming a part of the recruiting. Now you see Scott Cochran, you know, out on the trail as far as fundraising goes. I mean, he's bigger than life right now in Tuscaloosa, and it couldn't happen to a better guy. I love him.
Mike, we had Jonathan Allen on back in the summer. He told us behind Nick Saban, he was the second most important person in that building. You agree with him?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would even go as far as to say I don't think there's a close third. I think that, and I meant that wholeheartedly when I say Scott Cochran is the head coach of the summer. I mean, he really is. He's the guy who you spend the most time with. He is the guy who's leading the workouts. He's the guy who's instilling toughness. He's the guy who is instilling effort. He's the guy who is instilling discipline. I mean, you talk about the fourth quarter and what the five little pillars of good programs are. You're talking about a guy who's doing that in the offseason. Boy, get your hand behind the line, or you're going to go start this sprint back over. If you don't get low enough on squats, you're going to do it again. And that's just the groundworking for what Nick Saban does throughout the year. And Scott Cochran has taken it upon himself and taken it on his shoulders to really be one of the cornerstones of that program. And I agree with Jonathan Allen. He really he gets a ton of credit, but I don't know that he gets enough credit. I mean, obviously the highest paid strength coach in America. He deserves every dime of it. But, I mean, if he knew X's and O's of college football, I would put him in for a head coaching job of college football. I got to admit that. I mean, he's just that good at what he does. He's that good at motivating people, and he never takes a day off. And he's a guy that's always in your corner, is always willing to hear you out, but in the end, wants complete and total effort and toughness on the backside.
Mike, I want to go to Jonah Williams here at left tackle. You and I have talked about him before, but a lot of people say that at times he struggled with that transition from right to left. As you go back and try to study some of the reasons why he may have not had the clean transition, I know it's a difficult transition, but is there any reason you could put your finger on maybe some of the reasons why he didn't perform up to what we had come to expect after the freshman season at right tackle?
Yeah, I think that, listen, it's hard to get people explained when I talk about positional, just moving from one side to the other. It's like using your left hand instead of your right hand or whatever. If you're right-handed, it's like trying to write with your left hand. You have flexibility. You have strength in your push-off leg. You have the ability to kind of flex your ankle and kick back to the inside. And so, where Jonah Williams as a freshman was really good at keeping his shoulders square to the line of scrimmage, really giving, the rush edge guy kind of one way to get around him and shutting that down. You did see a little bit last year at left tackle. His shoulders kind of fly open. He kind of squares up to the rusher, kind of invites the bull rush at times, kind of invites the counter move to the inside. So I have no doubt in my mind that he's trying to shore that up, trying to get his shoulders squared back to the line of scrimmage. He's got the athletic ability to be able to do it. He's got the desire to be able to do it. I think he'll get it squared away. Now, obviously he's going to be pushed by an Alex Leatherwood or a Jedrick Wills or whoever else is in and around that program at that position. But Jonah Williams will find a home. I mean, he's just too good of a player to think that, he's not going to land at whatever position he wants to play. And so, there's definitely things you can clean up. I have no doubt that Brent Key's the guy to get that done. And from everything I've heard about Jonah Williams, he's got the right mindset to go out there and deliver.
Any chance you could see him sliding to that center spot that Bradley Bozeman left vacant?
I don't know. I think the opportunity's there. It's like I mentioned, Jonah Williams is going to be a starting player somewhere. I could definitely see him sliding back to right tackle, and a guy like Jedrick Wills finding himself at right guard or another position along the line, or even a left guard if Pierce Baker were to slide to center. I don't know that Jonah Williams is your first option of saying, hey, let's move him to center. I think there's other guys in that program. But I got to tell you, the second half we saw from Leatherwood in the national title game, and I mentioned this on Twitter a couple of times, it's as impressive as a half as you've seen from a true freshman in quite some time, other than Tua, obviously, who's grabbing all the headlines. And Leatherwood was just extremely good. I think both of those guys, Leatherwood and Williams, find a home on that offensive line. Now, where it's at, is to be considered, to be determined later on down the road. But those guys are both going to be starters next year, in my opinion.
Mike, you look at the strength of this offensive line, and you just started naming off names, and we're talking about in backup roles currently. I mean, somebody's got to knock out Matt Womack, which, is possible. You look at Lester Cotton. You look at Jedrick Wills. I mean, you begin to throw out these offensive line. We're talking about major five-star prospects. It's going to be fun to watch that competition, those battles on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I mean, you got to talk about a guy in Jedrick Wills, so I'm not mistaken. You told me, I think he was maybe the number one player in Kentucky, definitely the number one offensive lineman coming out of the state of Kentucky when he's coming out. And, Leatherwood's a five-star guy, got the arm span of an NBA player. I mean, these guys, I honestly think this offensive line next year is 9 deep. I mean, I really do. I think they're 9 deep. I think they are going to be an extremely special unit. I don't know if he'll be 2011, 2012 type special. I think that was maybe the best offensive line I've ever seen in college football, but boy, when you talk about left tackle to right tackle and every position in between, you really have your pick of the litter in terms of getting guys in there that can play. I firmly believe they go 9 deep of guys that are very, very good SEC offensive linemen. You're going to get Jonah Williams, obviously, going to be the cream of the crop. Ross Piercebaker's been around forever now, so he's going to be very good as well. It's going to be interesting to see the dynamic they try to put together next year in terms of who is starting and who's coming into backup roles, because there's just so many good players.
Mike, let me ask you how competition works at the offensive line. How are you in this battle, and how do you get your kind of grades on how you're doing in practice and sort of the evaluation of where you need to improve?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in a right tackle battle, my sophomore year. I was trying to gain weight. I was still coming in about 285, 290. But I was in a right tackle battle with Chris Capps. A lot of people remember him. Andre Smith took over the left tackle job for him. He switches over. And I could tell that it was a battle, Ryan, because, boy, they were hard on both of us. They were hard on every rep we took, and you're sitting there looking around going, well, that guy got beat. Well, that guy got beat. Why are they talking to me? And then you realize it's a good thing they're talking to you that way. It's a good thing that they're breaking down every rep, because that means it really is a position battle. They want to know who's going to step above the other one and who's going to, really take control of that job. And I was able to find that starting job, my sophomore year, just because, listen, I didn't want to sit the bench anymore. And, I was able to get in there and really pay attention to every single rep, try to use my athleticism, even though I was a little bit undersized still at the time, and do some good things. And so I think when you start breaking down reps and coaches really start breaking down, I mean, every step you're taking, every head placement, every hand placement, that's when you know it's a battle. And that's when you better buckle up and get your helmet put on straight, because, those coaches are paying attention, and everybody wants the best players on the field, and that's where they're going to find it out.
All right, Mike, you know Nick Saban as well as anybody. You played for Nick Saban here at the University of Alabama. When you hear last night about 7 o'clock, the news broke from Matt Zenitz from AL.com that Butch Jones was at least a candidate as an offensive analyst for the University of Alabama. What was your first reaction?
Head scratcher, a little bit. And, I know this kind of goes to the dynamic that, that Nick Saban likes to rehab coaches' images, and he likes to get guys in there that he can kind of restructure. And, if you look at the analyst role and you look at the fact that Butch Jones is pulling $8.2 million over the next 3 years from Tennessee, and it makes a little bit more sense. I think one of the most puzzling parts for me is that most of the guys that Nick Saban have brought in have been dynamic at what they do in certain situations. Lane Kiffin was a dynamic play caller. Everybody knew it. He had the off-field questions. Same with Steve Sarkisian. He was a great head coach for a lot of time. But he fell off the wagon in other areas. I don't know that Butch Jones really fits into that mold. Everybody's going to compare them. But Butch Jones, you don't have any questions about what he's doing off the field. You have questions about, what he is as a coach in general. But listen, I think if nothing else, if you bring him in as a sounding board, if you bring him in as some guy who has a difference of opinion, a guy who has ideas that are different from yours, a guy who has been around the block, then, I think Alabama fans should be excited about what Butch Jones can bring to that position. You're not risking a ton. You're not paying him a ton of money. He's kind of coming in on his own accord. So I guess if nothing else, a guy who you can ask questions to and bounce ideas off of, I think that lets Alabama fans rest a little bit easier. And I got to say, Ryan, I'm not huge on it. I'm not huge on it. I'm gonna have to see it pan out. But when you look at what the alternatives are, maybe a 25-year-old GA maybe getting signed to that position other than Butch Jones. I think when you look at the alternative, that's when you really start to realize it's a good move by Nick.
Well, I think the offensive analyst and the defensive analyst, Nick Saban has lost a lot of guys. And you look at defensive analyst, offensive analyst, Chris Weinke went to Tennessee as a running backs coach. That was one of his lead offensive analysts. Then you look at Wes Neighbors. Now, I'm trying to think of years. They kind of cross up me a little bit. But you may have played with Wes here at the University of Alabama.
I did.
He's down at Florida Atlantic as on the field. So he was their lead defensive analyst here at the University of Alabama. So even though we look at on-the-field coaches, they've lost some analysts as well, off-the-field guys. Very important.
Well, yeah, you talk about William Vallejos, who took a job up with Brian Daboll up in Buffalo. Shea Tierney is another guy who just came out of that program. I'm at a loss for his name, but I think it's Dan Werner that took a job at South Carolina.
You're right.
You talk about the cupboard being empty on the coaching side. You got to look all the way down that coaching tree and understand they've lost a lot of guys there as well. And so, I have a lot of questions about what Butch Jones is, what he's going to be as an analyst in that program. But, I guess the alternative is you're not signing like I said, 25-year-old kind of GA fresh out of college. You're getting a guy who has had a ton of experience as not only a head coach but a play caller. And so I guess that can be looked at as a positive thing.
Mike, final couple of things here. When you look at these offensive coaches like Josh Gaddis that's been added, when you look at Dan Enos, those guys get me fired up when you start looking at their pedigree and what they're going to bring from an on-the-field responsibility.
They definitely do. And there's a central kind of theme. I mean, this entire coaching staff was built, other than Coach Kuligowski, I guess, this entire coaching staff was built around recruiting and energy and youth and guys that are going to stick around for a while and guys that do that, guys that get you pumped up, guys like Jeff Banks. Kuligowski gets me pumped up, but I don't know if he's known as a good recruiter. But Dan Enos is another guy. They're energetic. They're young. They're they can build relationships with the recruits. They're going to be around for some time. That's why it gets me fired up because I know that Nick Saban, every move he made, even Panunzio being the running backs coach taking over for Burton Burns. I love Burton. I think Burton's one of the best coaches to ever come through college football. But when you look at his age, look at how much he's traveling nowadays. You got to have that energy. You got to have guys that are willing to fly whenever on Friday nights, and Panunzio fits that bill as well. I think this entire staff was molded around getting back to being the number one recruiting class in the country, and I have every reason to believe they're going to be able to do that this year.
Yeah, you look at Joe Panunzio, as you got to know here at the University of Alabama, that he was highly sought after in the NFL. The Philadelphia Eagles wanted to bring him back, so Nick Saban kind of had to jump in and say, no, we need to keep you because you're a top 15 recruiter in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, you definitely do. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. You have to have guys that are hungry to get out there and get it done. I think Panunzio, through everybody I know, and I've met him a few times, he's that kind of guy. And it's like I said, there's a central theme with these hires. It's all about recruiting. Even Coach LaPoy and Coach Loxley, they're obviously good coaches, but one of the reasons you promote from within this year, which you usually don't do under Nick Saban, the reasons you promote from within this year is because recruiting. They already have established relationships. They already have those recruits in their back pocket, and every decision he made had that with that in mind.
Certainly. All right, so final question. Will Nick Saban open it up this year in 2018? Will he go away from maybe the conservative guy that we've known? Now, he has grown into it. Lane Kiffin got him to open up a little bit. But will Nick Saban, if given the opportunity, will he open up the offense and let Tua fly?
I think that's there's a lot of ifs in there, Ryan. I think you have to have Tua take the reins first.
You're right. Sure.
Listen, I'm as big already of a Tua fan as everybody else out there. But the fact is, you do take the sack there on first down. You do make a couple ill-advised throws. You do throw an interception. You do get lucky on maybe a couple other balls. So I got to see how he comes along. I got to see how the young receiving core comes along. Although I think they're going to be extremely good. Maybe the best. Honestly, maybe the best receiving core that's going to be in the country from top to bottom. And so I think the ability's there. I think it's going to depend on different game situations. But I'm going to sleep easy at night knowing that if they want to, that's exactly what they could do. But I do look at the offensive line we already talked about. I look at Damian Harris and Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs. They can run any style of offense they want. Let's just be honest here. With the names and the talent they're going to have on the field, Nick Saban can go any direction or Michael Oxley that he wants to. And so it's going to be all about kind of putting your will in on some of these teams and matching wit for wit. But I have no doubt this is going to be an extremely balanced offense, and when they have to air it out, they've got the weapons to do it.